I'm kind of thinking about there's these two things, kind of two competing forces right now being, well, not even competing. I think that makes it sound more dramatic than it is, but there's kind of a, especially related to mortgage tech, an independent movement, let's call it, and I think both of us might fall into that category. And then there's kind of the network led technology, right? So, networks who have built their own technology and sharing it with their brokers. And so, first and foremost, I guess, do you kind of see that? Is that the right way to kind of pitch how you're seeing things out in the marketplace right now? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, listen, I think there's no question that the networks do their best to push their own technology onto their captive audiences. I get it. I was there. I pushed that narrative for a very long time. I think there is a place for the Axiom Scarletts of the world. The truth is, there's two big networks that probably control, let's say, 60% of all originations
Yeah.
across the country. So, to us, how do we find a way to coexist in that environment? Right.
Hmm.
So for me to think that we can come and fight the behemoths and think that we can knock them down, sure, it's possible, I guess,
Sure.
with enough
Yeah.
money and staying power. But to us, maybe it's a little bit of my philosophy. It's about cooperation and collaboration. If
Yep.
there's a way that we can win-win, then we all win. Right. And the truth is, we are a technology provider that does some great work for mortgage brokers,
Yep.
and we can fill gaps. And that's why we have working relationships with DLC groups of the world. That's why, I was just down at the Verico conference, because there's ways that we can find ways to work together and not step on each other's toes. So I think that's really where it comes down to. Is I think if you step on each other's toes, then you're ultimately going to end up in a fight.
Yep.
But if you find a way to be honest and open and find that common ground of opportunity, you can find a way to win-win. And that's always been my motto.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think there always is a win-win? I think that, sometimes, especially, when you might view someone as a, maybe not a direct competitor, but a competitor on a couple different angles. And this might just be speaking maybe to your experience, because I know you've been around the block a bunch of times, is to say, okay, no matter what situation we're in or anyone's in, is there that win-win to be found? Do you genuinely believe that? And if so, how do you kind of go about navigating that, right? Especially in that situation where you say, okay, hey, do you know what? Kind of does look like on at least the service level, we're really competing with each other. How do I actually come to you and say, no, maybe not? And actually, hey, if I can do this for you, that's going to benefit you. And actually, that's going to also benefit me. How do you even start those conversations, or how do you think about that?
It reminds me a little bit of that prisoner's dilemma model,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Where if we both agree to play nice, then we'll both share in the prize.
Yes.
But if one decides to quote unquote screw the other, then one wins and the other one loses. So listen, at the end of the day, do we split it right down the middle? Probably not.
Hmm.
If one person's got more leverage than the other, then the sharing of the pie may differ from one versus the other. But I think at the end of the day, so long as the long-term objectives don't intersect,
Hmm.
if you and I are going after the same prize, then ultimately we're going to end up in a position of conflict.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, if your prize is different from my prize, it's about looking at a situation and seeing it beyond what exists today. And I think that's the way we've always approached it here at Axiom and Scarlett. So, one of the things that drew me to Joe was a lot of these kind of conversations about, where does Axiom play in the world of the mortgage broker space? And, is it our goal to squeeze and take from the networks? And the answer was always a no. Like, we're not
Yeah.
going to direct connect to lenders. I think if that decision was ultimately made, my mentality is that I have a conversation and tell people, because
Yeah.
if the business model changes, then I owe it to the partners to say, my model's changing. This is the reason why.
Yeah.
But today it's not the case. And for that reason, people are willing to play with us and allow us into their tent, if you want to call it that, and know that we're not here to pillage them,
Yeah.
that we're here to actually make it bigger than it is today.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly right. I honestly think it's maybe a little bit of a human nature thing. I think we see it play out, sometimes in the political sphere, if I abstract to that, which is your gain is my loss, right? I think that there is a human maybe tendency to think that, that the pie is only so big. And so if you win, if there's rich people out there, that means that they've taken from the poor people, right? Or something like that. That's drawing the
Yeah.
analogy. And I think that if I were to summarize, is the last kind of point you made at the end, which is, hey, if we actually work together, it's not just one pie. The pie can get bigger, right? We can increase the pie by working together. And I think that's such a powerful thing.
Tom, I'll probably draw a little bit back to our original conversation, which is these aren't easy things to have. And as you said, human nature naturally tends to think negatively. Honestly, this is where sort of, I guess, my history in the industry and my reputation sort of sets in and goes, have I ever behaved in a way that would make you believe that I'm coming in here to say one thing and do another?
Right.
Tom, as you said, we're only as good as our reputation.
Yeah.
And that's why, I'm always very careful that, we try to move in a direction that doesn't give people reason to doubt the words that come out of our mouths.
No, yeah, it's one of those crazy things, right? It's, a couple things come to mind is, it can take a lifetime to build trust and it just takes one action to lose it. Right. I think it is. And drawing on, you talked about our upbringing. I'll draw on mine briefly is that, remember growing up, my dad would always talk about this reputation and he'd always say it. And I'd be a bratty teenager and say, you don't know what you're talking about, Dad. And, here I am how many years later and talking about that exact thing. So it's funny how these things kind of come full circle.